I'm sure you've all had this experience. I'm going through it right now as we're planning a trip for the fall. And every time you click the price of a flight or of a hotel, it seems to change. And that's the case with concert tickets, Uber rides. Every time the price seems to change. And that's not a glitch. That is actually an algorithm hard at work there. And the Competition Bureau here in Canada, it wants to do something about it. I'm going to talk about that in today's video. But first, just a short while ago this morning, the new U.S. inflation numbers came out. So I want to quickly cover those, bring you up to speed there. We saw a few months of decline, but prices did tick up just a little bit this morning. Not by a lot, but just enough to sort of take notice. So I want to break that down right here. When we look at the actual data, in May, the annual inflation rate rose to 2.4%. That's up slightly from April's 2.3%. That was the lowest since 2021. Bit of a twist here, though. The analysts had actually expected 2.5% this month, or last month, actually. So inflation came in a little bit under what was forecasted. If you look at it on a monthly basis, the CPI did rise 0.1%, down from 0.2% in April. Again, that came in below expectations. Now, as always, there were several areas that did see some price increases, some notable areas. First off, food prices up by 2.9%. That's a little bit higher than 2.8% we saw last time around. Used cars and trucks up 1.8%. And transportation services climbed to 2.8%. However, inflation for shelter, that's still a very big contributor, eased a little bit to 3.9%. Energy prices, always a big factor. They continued their decline, dropping 3.5%. Gasoline is now 12% cheaper than it was a year ago. Fuel oil also fell. Natural gas does still remain high, though, up over 15%. That's slightly less than a month before. Now, core inflation, and this is an important number because this is what the Fed watches more closely. It strips out food, energy, more volatile parts of pricing. That held steady, 2.8%. Still a low, again, not seen since 2021, and below the expectation of 2.9%. On a monthly basis, core CPI also rose just 0.1%. That came in under the 0.3% forecast. So on the face here, these numbers do look pretty encouraging. Still worth exercising some caution. I would say the economy is still facing a lot of uncertainty out there, global uncertainty, in fact, and any shift in that could change these numbers pretty quickly. Now, the next story, this is a bit controversial, but I want to walk through it with you, see what your thoughts are on it. The Competition Bureau of Canada is investigating how companies are using algorithms to set prices. And they're asking for your input. They're asking for the public input. They say that more than 60 firms are using this algorithmic pricing from ride-sharing services to hotels, to flights, to concert tickets. And these are the systems that adjust prices automatically, usually in real time, and it's based on demand or other data. So why do I find this controversial? Well, first of all, as a shareholder, I got to say, I love when these companies have the ability to maximize their profits by using these very, very powerful tools. But as a consumer, as I said at the outset of this video, I just hate these. I hate the stress of feeling so compelled to buy now before the system outsmarts you and raises the price. And I know that you share that pain with me. We've all felt this before. Now, the Bureau says that these tools could help companies become more efficient. That's true. But it also does come with some serious risks. And they say that if several companies use the same or similar algorithmic models, it could create a type of collusion. Even if there's no explicit agreement between the companies to fix prices, that would then be a violation of the Competition Act. Now, in a paper that was released yesterday, it says algorithmic pricing could become an issue under the Competition Act if multiple companies rely on the same model to set pricing, creating a form of collusion on pricing even without explicit collaboration. Another concern is predatory pricing, and this is when algorithms might allow a company to target only a rival's customers with big discounts rather than lowering their prices across the board. So that could unfairly squeeze competitors out of the market. That's what the Bureau is concerned about here. They also confirmed earlier this year that they're looking at how algorithmic pricing might be affecting Canadian real estate rental markets, and that is a big deal. So right now they're calling for public feedback as part of this growing effort to update the competition rules to sort of catch up to this digital age where we're seeing more and more of this automation. They're saying as automation spreads across industries, the regulators want to make sure that the tools are promoting healthy competition and not manipulating it. Now, my next story today is the World Bank, and they say that we're entering the slowest decade of growth now since the 1960s. That's the That's the decade I was born, early in the 60s. And in its latest forecast, the global GDP is expected to rise just 2.3% in 2025. That's down from a 2.7% forecast back in January. The report notes that we'll see deceleration in most economies relative to last year. This would mark the slowest rate of global growth since 2008, aside from outright global recessions. Over 60% of countries saw their outlook cut, including the US, Japan, and Europe, which all took hits here. Now, the key driver behind this skepticism here is Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs. And since taking office, of course, he's imposed that 10% universal tariff import tariff, which has shaken the markets and has drawn international criticism. The World Bank here says, against the backdrop of heightened policy uncertainty and increased trade barriers, the global economic context has become more challenging, with the risk of further adverse policy shifts materializing, particularly with respect to trade relations among the largest economies. Interestingly here, these tariffs were ruled illegal in the U.S. federal court in May, but they're still in place pending an appeal. But if they do continue, or if they escalate, the bank is warning that global trade could seize up, in their words, later this year, with collapsing investor confidence and rising inflation. Now, the bank isn't necessarily predicting a full-blown global recession just yet. They're saying the chance of that is less than 10%, but sentiment is definitely shaky. And the OECD, they also recently trimmed its forecast, now expecting global growth of just 2.9%, down from 3.1%. Now, final story today is that after the Trump administration slapped these tariffs on a lot of these Canadian goods back in March, provincial leaders across the country hit back with their own protest, and that was halting the imports of U.S. alcohol. We've all heard that story, I'm sure. And talk about an impact. In April, Canada imported just $2.9 million in U.S. wine. That's down from a monthly average of $49.2 million last year. That is a 94% drop, according to Statistics Canada. So we started seeing a lot of empty shelves where the U.S. product would usually be. The consumer demand is still there. So importers, they rushed to fill that void with wines from other countries. Argentina, Australia, France, and Italy were the big benefactors there. Now, Richard Dittmar, he is the president and CEO of Trialto Wine Group, and he says that he made a lot of rush orders back in March. Now he says April and May is kind of like waiting for the stock to get here. June, things are going to start to arrive, and we'll have more product to fill that demand for U.S. substitutes. In fact, what we did see is Canadian wine imports, excluding the U.S., were up 12.5% over the first 4 months of 2025. Imports from New Zealand jumped 31%, and Australia 28%. Now, some recent news here, we do have some provinces that are beginning to relax those restrictions. Notably, Alberta has resumed its alcohol purchases from the U.S. in June. Saskatchewan is following suit. But one of the largest importers, maybe the largest import, Ontario, they aren't bending to that pressure just yet. In fact, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, he says he won't be taking steps to reorder U.S. alcohol just yet. He says, not until he gets rid of these tariffs, why should I? It's a small kitchen table issue, but Kentucky knows how important bourbon is to the economy. I think the last important piece of this puzzle here is what is going to happen eventually when those trade wars cool down and we open the markets back up again to more U.S. products. Importers, they're saying that they're not expecting Canadians to rush back to U.S. wines anytime soon. Okay, that brings you up to date with the latest news. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button on this video if you're still watching. As always, I say thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.